third grade. So for this section of our Denver Big City unit, we are going to learn a little bit about Denver in its early days and how it came to be how it is now. And so during this assignment, I'm just going to read to you quite a few pages about Denver. I'm not going to talk a lot of extra things about it. I'm just going to read those pages, and you have the assignment of having a blank piece of paper, and you can draw in color as I'm reading, and I want you to draw in color what this makes you think of as you're reading. So there won't be drawings of aliens, and there won't be drawings of race cars. This is, you're drawing what you're listening and hearing about, and you will upload a picture of that drawing to me to get credit for this assignment. All right, so I'm going to be reading this book. Ooh, hard to see the pictures. There we go. I'm also going to turn off my light. Sorry, friends, just like if you were really here, huh? And hopefully you can see the pictures, but much better that way. So I'm just going to read, and you can see the pictures as I go, and you're going to be drawing. So if you need to stop the video so you can go get your things to draw with, you can do that. All right. The city of Denver began at a place where many people had passed before. Explorers had been through this area. They called it the Great American Desert. They did not think it would be a good place to live. The Cheyenne and the Arapaho Indians did not agree. They had lived in this area for many years. Many people had passed through this area on the way to the California gold fields. They did not know that gold was hiding right there in the Colorado mountains. The city of Denver began on the banks of Cherry Creek, where American Indians once lived. In 1858, things began to change. William Green Russell found gold in Cherry Creek. This was the first gold found in Colorado. There's a picture there. Miners came from far away to look for gold in this creek. These miners had heard stories about how easy it was to find gold there. One story said a miner rolled his wheelbarrow into the creek. When he pulled it back out, it was covered with gold. Of course, the story was not true. The miners did not find much gold in the creek. Many of them moved on to look for gold in the mountains. Others decided to stay by the creek, even though this land really belonged to the Indians. A treaty or agreement between the Indians and the settlers was signed in 1851. The Arapaho and Cheyenne Indians had been promised a large area of land east of the Rocky Mountains. They were told this would be their hunting grounds forever. The chief had promised not to fight with the settlers. He tried to keep his promise even when the miners continued to settle on Indian land. Many members of the Arapaho tribe had pitched their teepees in the woods along the Platte River. The winter camp of the Southern Arapaho was near what is now 15th and Blake Street. The Indians watched sadly as the settlers took over their land and destroyed their hunting grounds. The animals they had hunted for years were being frightened away. The Indians' way of life would never be the same. By 1858, stores were being built near Cherry Creek. Around 125 cabins were in the area. More than 400 miners were camped along the South Platte. There were two places where the miners settled. On one side of the creek was Auraria City. Auraria is the Latin word for gold. On the other side of the creek was Denver City. It was named after James Denver. He was the governor of the Kansas Territory. At that time, this area was part of the Kansas Territory. The man who gave Denver its name also named the main street after himself. His name was William Larimer. Larimer Street is still an important place in Denver. On January 18, 1858, the first post office was set up in Auraria. This was an important way for the settlers to keep touch with their families and friends back east. Gold was discovered at Cripple Creek in 1859. Many miners came to Denver City and Auraria to buy supplies. This area also became a supply center for many mining towns springing up in the mountains. Many different stores were opened to serve the miners' needs. Gold helped turn Denver and Auraria into boom towns. A boom town is a town that grows very fast. The Rocky Mountain News published the first newspaper on April 23, 1859. This is the first Rocky Mountain News building that they have pictured there. There's another picture for you. It cost the settlers 25 cents or a pinch of gold dust for a copy of the paper. Readers were told that for $5 they could get the paper each week for a year. In 1859, the Denver and Auraria had about 300 buildings. They were made from rough pine logs. Mixed in among these buildings were a few Indian lodges. Many of the buildings were unfinished. A few had glass windows and wood floors. Many did not have a roof or even a door. About the only furniture was a stool or two, a table, and a simple bed. Rough boxes were used as places of cupboards and dressers. It was not unusual to see covered wagons on Larimer Street around 1859. There's a picture here. All right. The hearth and fireplaces were made from adobe. This was a mixture of clay, straw, and sand and water which was made into bricks. Chimneys were made of sticks and covered with mud. Most of the roofs were made of logs covered with dirt and prairie grass. This is a picture of North Denver Public School. It was big enough for many students. Churches were built. The first doctor came to the area in the spring of 1859. Shortly after that, the first hospital opened on Larimer Street. Oxen-covered wagons, hand carts, buckboards, and prairie schooners seemed to clog the dirty streets. In the same year, the first school opened in the new settlement. On December 1st, 1862, two school districts were set up in Denver. By the early 1870s, there were 12 school districts in Denver, and by 1902, all of these districts became one. This new district was called the Denver Public Schools. On November 16, 1864, Colorado Seminary was opened. This later became the University of Denver. In 1860, the two settlements came together and used the name Denver City. There were 4,749 people living there at the time. The first mayor of the city was John Moore. In 1861, the telegraph reached Julesburg in northeastern Colorado. Here's the map of Denver. Map of Colorado. Here's Denver, and here's Julesburg, right in the corner. If someone from Denver wanted to send a telegram, the message had to be taken 200 miles by stagecoach to the Julesburg station. The message could then be sent quickly to where it needed to go. In October of 1863, a telegraph line was finally brought into Denver. Colorado Territory. In 1861, Colorado became a territory. A territory is an area that is a part of the United States, but hasn't yet become a state. Colorado City was named the first capital of the Colorado Territory. So that's down here, as you can see in this map. Here's Golden, here's Denver, and here's Colorado City. In 1862, the capital was moved to Golden. Denver was named the capital of the Colorado Territory in 1867. So first it was Colorado City, then Golden, then Denver. On August 1st, 1876, Colorado became a state. There were many problems for early Denver. In 1863, a fire raced through the town and left a pile of rubble. The people rebuilt the town. A year later, Cherry Creek overflowed and flooded the town. Once again, the city had to be rebuilt. The creek flooded many times over the years, and in 1850, a dam was built on the creek. This helped control the water flow. Probably the biggest problem Denver faced was when the railroad decided to build through Cheyenne, Wyoming. Denver would be 100 miles from the nearest station. Everyone thought this would be the end of Denver. Businessmen did not want their city to die. They raised money to build a railroad line between Denver and Cheyenne. It was completed in 1871. This helped keep Denver alive. The population of Denver grew from 5,000 in 1870 to 35,000 in 1880. There's Cherry Creek, the flood in 1864. Denver continues to grow. While looking for gold in the mountains of Colorado, many miners found other things. Silver was discovered in Colorado in the 1870s. Lots of miners became very wealthy. Many of them moved to Denver and built fancy houses and hotels. They lived a life of luxury. In 1879, the first telephone switchboard opened in Denver. There were 161 phones. Most of them were in businesses in town. In 1880, electric lights were used to light the downtown area. Denver was only the third city in the world to use electricity for lighting the streets. Many people lived and worked in Denver. They worked long hours in the stores and factories. Here is in 1892. Denver was a pretty big city by then. And here is Larimer Street, and it was a busy city even in 1884. You can see quite a few people and things going on there. Other families decided to start farms or ranches. There was another major gold strike on Cripple Creek in 1891. This gold strike helped Denver grow even more. In 1893, the price of silver dropped. Many of the men who had made their fortune from silver lost all their money. This was very hard for Denver. Suddenly, Denver did not have the rich families pouring money into the town. Businesses closed and many people left Denver. About the same time, farming and ranching were becoming important to Colorado. Beef, sugar beets, and other crops were becoming more important than mining. Manufacturing was also important. Small factories like the Samsonite and Gates Rubber Company were set up in the Denver area. In the early 1900s, people began to look for oil or black gold. Oil is used to make gasoline. gasoline was being used for a new invention called the car. Here's a view of Denver. It was taken from the state capitol building in 1909. Some really tall buildings there. And this is the Gates Rubber Company. It was an important building that is no longer there. Actually, they just took it down about 10 to 20 years ago. In 1904, Mayor Robert Speer began a program he called City Beautiful. New parks were created, new and better roads were built, including one that was named after the mayor. The Civic Center was built. Mayor Speer helped to make Denver a nicer city. This is Speer Boulevard, and it looks really different now. It was just this dirt road with just some trees, and now it's a major road in downtown Denver. World War I. America entered World War I in 1917. Many people in Colorado did all they could to help the soldiers. They sent clothing and supplies to the soldiers in Europe. There was a need for metal, and Colorado miners worked hard to find more metal to meet this need. The soldiers needed food. The farmers began to grow more and more crops. They were paid high prices for their crops. Farmers and miners struggled after World War I because the prices dropped. Farmers tried to make ends meet by plowing and planting more and more land in the eastern plains. Around 1934, Colorado had a drought. This was a time when there was not very much rainfall or moisture. The drought lasted for several years. Crops could not grow. Strong winds blew the soil, making big clouds of dust. This area became known as the Dust Bowl. Many farmers had to leave their farms and go to the cities to look for jobs. During the same time, there was a depression in the United States. Many people were losing their jobs. Many mine and factory workers were without jobs. 1 out of every 4 adults was out of work. Here's a picture of a dust storm that would carry the topsoil away from the farms many, many miles. The government tried to help by giving people jobs. These workers built roads and ski lodges in Colorado. They built parks and campgrounds. People were put to work repairing schools, planting trees, and making clothing. Some farmers learned how to plant crops that would do well in the dry eastern plains. Other farmers moved to the western slope where there was more water for their crops. Much of the plains was replanted with the natural grasses to hold the soil in place. And here's all the people lining up outside the Rocky Mountain News waiting for the Help Wanted ads so they could find a job. Television and radio. On March 10, 1922, the first radio station began in Colorado. Shortly after that, other radio stations were started. Many families would gather around their radios in the evening to listen to a variety of programs. In July 18th of 1952, the first TV signal was sent out to Denver area, and Channel 2 has been on the air ever since. Other TV stations followed over the years. Now viewers in Denver have a choice of hundreds of TV stations. And this woman is listening to a radio using an earpiece. And this is an old-fashioned radio right here. In 1941, the United States entered the World War II, and the need for food once again helped the farmers of Colorado. Miners were put back to work helping to supply things for the military, and an ammunition plant opened in Denver in 1941. This put 20,000 people back to work. Many military bases were built in Colorado. Lowry Airfield was set up in 1937. Buckley Field was opened in 1942. Some troops trained in the mountains near Leadville. Uranium was the next mineral to cause people to rush to Colorado. Uranium was used to build atomic weapons. This boom lasted until the 1960s. The government stopped buying uranium in large amounts about that time. And here's a woman that was working in the ammunition plant. All right, we're almost done, friends. Denver today. Denver's population continued to grow after World War II. People liked to come to Colorado for its beautiful mountains. They liked skiing, hunting, and fishing. Colorado was also famous for its healthy climate. People with lung diseases came to Colorado for the fresh mountain air, and that would help them get well. In the 1950s, Denver was one of America's fastest growing cities. Other people came to Denver to work for the government. After World War II, Denver became a center for government agencies. There are many government agencies in Denver that is sometimes called Washington West. In the 1970s and early 80s, oil, natural gas, and coal mining became very important to Colorado. Oil companies began to move to Denver. The companies built new skyscrapers in downtown Denver. In the middle of the 1980s, the price of oil dropped suddenly, and many of the new buildings sat empty for quite a few years. Here's the skyscrapers that were being built in 1979. Today, many companies have made Denver their home. Some large companies have hundreds of people who work for them. Others hire only few workers. All of these companies are really important to Denver, and they provide jobs people need in order to live in this great city. Agricultural, manufacturing, and mining are still important to Denver. Many things are made or grow in the area. Most of the jobs in Colorado are in the service industry. These are people who help other people. Doctors, teachers, police officers all provide a service. People who work in hotels, restaurants, and ski resorts also provide a service. They help take care of the tourists or people who like to visit Colorado each year. Today, there are over 500,000 people who live in the Denver city limits. There are over 2 million people who live in the Denver area. This includes areas like Aurora, Thornton, Glendale, Littleton, and Inglewood. Over the years, Denver has had many ups and downs, and it all seems that no matter how bad things get, Denver always comes out on top. All right, my friends, I know that was a long video. Just go ahead and now that you've finished your picture, hopefully, finish it up, take a picture of it, and upload it to this assignment so I can give you credit. And tomorrow we'll be learning about more things about Denver.